Donald Trump won the 2024 presidential election. And I know that many people will want me to solely blame Kamala Harris's campaign strategy or the Democrats as a party. But frankly, you cannot convince me that a nation of people who cannot be convinced not to vote for a white supremacist, promising to destroy their rights, every marginalized community, and their entire democracy is without blame, that they are not responsible for their choices and the consequences that will follow. I want to make this brief because frankly, it's clear to me that I have been wasting my breath trying to warn Americans of the dangers of a Trump administration because Trump himself told them what those dangers were. He didn't run on policy. He didn't promise to build anything. Instead, he promised to tear this nation apart, to break things down. He openly promised us police violence, total police immunity, not only the deportation and abuse of undocumented immigrants, but to reverse naturalization for immigrants who became U.S. citizens already. He promised to ban abortion nationwide, to dismantle the EPA, the Department of Education. He promised to ban our history, to ban books, to keep the American public even dumber than apparently more than 64 million Americans already are, because the majority of this country's voters voted for him. Understand this. Donald Trump did not just win the Electoral College. He won the popular vote. And I would argue he won it by a landslide. For years, I have listened to Americans insist that Hillary Clinton is to blame for losing the 2016 election to Donald Trump. That she was too unlikable. That she called Trump voters deplorables. That she didn't campaign enough in the swing states. And for years, I have thought how ridiculous a nation must be to insist it made perfect sense to elect a white supremacist, sexist, xenophobic, racist, stupid ass bigot who told us exactly who he was because the woman he ran against wasn't likable enough, that she didn't campaign hard enough. All the while, I have thought that if it's an uphill battle for anyone to beat a white supremacist, they are far more qualified than, for any reason, it is an indictment on the nation. But that's never what I've said, because I have always chosen to try to be mindful about how I discuss U.S. elections whose results totally upend my life. And I knew, not just based on that election, or the general voting patterns of each demographic in this country, or the bigoted discourse that's been suffocating us all for 3 election cycles now, but by my lived experience as a Black woman, that this deeply racist and sexist country that refused to elect a white woman would not elect a Black woman. I knew that, and I voiced that the moment Joe Biden dropped out and Kamala Harris became the nominee. But I allowed people to muscle me into believing America isn't who I've always known it to be, and who it continues to show me it is. I listened to people tell me that I was being too cynical to believe she would have an impossible hill to climb, to believe that white women would never vote for her no matter what they told you, that this country hates Black women, that it hates immigrants, and that it hates Kamala Harris not for who she is, but what she is. But people wanted her to win. We wanted her to win. They wanted to believe she could win. They wanted to feel optimistic, which required them to believe America was not America. So they convinced themselves Kamala Harris could win if she did X, Y, Z, if she ran a particular kind of campaign, if she was more left, if she was less left, if she laughed less, if she talked more, the list goes on. And people were so convinced, I let them sell me a dream I knew was a mirage. I let people muscle me into forgetting the most important truth about racism and misogyny, which is that it doesn't care about truth. It does not care about qualifications. It does not care about fair. The truth is, there is nothing Kamala Harris could have done to win that election. I knew it when she became the nominee, and I'm more sure than ever before. Many leftists want to believe and will continue to argue tooth and nail that she did not win because she wasn't left enough, because she was too centrist, because of her stance on Gaza. But the evidence simply does not reflect this. First of all, maybe if only Kamala Harris lost, you could choose to ignore all the data that explicitly told us that Americans believed Kamala Harris and the Democrats were too liberal, which is something they likely believed not because of Kamala Harris's actual stances or policy agenda, but simply because she's a Black woman. But it wasn't just Kamala Harris who lost. It's not even just that the Democrats are projected to lose the Senate and the House, but progressive legislation on the ballot failed all over the country. From Florida to California failed. The entire country moved to the far right. Some leftists will choose to believe that the entire country moving to the far right, shooting down progressive legislation and candidates nationwide, and explicitly declaring that the Democratic candidate was too left is proof that the candidate lost because she didn't openly pander to the far left enough. many of whom declared time and time again that they wouldn't vote for a Democrat under any circumstances because they were going to break the duopoly, get the Greens to 5%, teach the Democrats a lesson on Gaza, vote their conscience, vote their heart, not vote at all because both parties are the same and fascism is already here. Some leftists will choose to believe this outcome is the result of Gaza, and that this outcome proves that the Democrats would have won had they listened to the furthest left. But the data does not support this. Jill Stein did not win 5%. She didn't even win 2%, not in Michigan or anywhere else. The exit polls indicated what many already knew, and it's that Americans care about domestic issues far more than they care about foreign policy or what happens abroad. They voted on economy and their flatly incorrect belief that Trump would be better on the economy, despite economist after economist assuring us all that Trump will destroy the economy, and that he would suppress the marginalized groups they've grown sick of hearing from. Leftists will say that Democrats have no one to blame for the results of this election but themselves. But that implies that it's Democrats who lost something tonight. But it's all of us who lost. We will lose our rights, and many of us will lose our lives. You are not dunking on the Dems. You are dunking on us. The joke is on us. America is not who many leftists want to believe it is. The truth is that this country is deeply, deeply racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic, fundamentally hateful, and downright uneducated. No one will gain anything from a Trump presidency, but the losses will be crippling. Importantly, although I think many leftists are wrong in what they'll choose to take from the results of this election, I want to be explicitly and abundantly clear that leftists, far left or otherwise, are not to blame for the results of this election. Shoots, not even the Electoral College is to blame, because most voters did vote for Trump. But you know who didn't? Black people. If there is one solitary group in this country who is not to blame for the dark times that are soon to come upon us, it's black people, who voted overwhelmingly for the Democrats and to save this democracy. And despite how many thinly veiled racist attacks black people had to endure all election season, that we were only voting for Kamala because she's black, all ranging from Republicans to white leftists and even some non-white people, like the Green Party's both transphobic and anti-abortion vice presidential pick, Butch Ware, the truth is that black people always vote overwhelmingly Democrat, even when the candidates have been white as they usually are, because the alternative is a white supremacist party openly and aggressively committed to our subjugation. So do not look to black people to blame for what's to come. Look to white men, white women, and Latino voters, who I wish I could say I was surprised by, but I am not, because I know what this country is. Throughout Kamala Harris's campaign, people who invested their efforts into protesting against her because their contempt is reserved for liberals, not fascists, told us that they were protesting Kamala Harris and making demands of Kamala Harris while speaking nothing of Donald Trump, asking nothing of Donald Trump, and downplaying every threat made by Donald Trump because they said that they knew they could not get anywhere with Donald Trump. And they were correct. We will not get anywhere with Donald Trump. So save your demands because he will not hear them. Hold off on your protests because you will likely be brutalized and criminalized, as Donald Trump has promised police violence. Make peace with the rights that you've already lost to Trump's Supreme Court and kiss the remainders goodbye, because any hope at saving the Supreme Court or any of your rights is done, at least for your lifetime. Whatever you thought the Democrats didn't do enough of, prepare to lose even that much. I don't have to wonder about the nightmare to come because Donald Trump, the Republicans, and the Christian Heritage Foundation told us exactly what they have planned and how they're going to do it. And America overwhelmingly declared that it's what they want. And who am I to lecture America about what's best for them? I have moved through so many emotions tonight, from heartbreaking disbelief to rage, and finally I have tried to land on apathy and exhaustion. I have expended all my energy trying to convince Americans that you should take seriously a man threatening to upend your democracy and civil rights, especially when that same man already served as president and did things like incite a fucking insurrection when he lost. I have no energy to keep trying to convince Americans that their enemy is not the most oppressed, marginalized group in their society, that hurting immigrants will not bring you money, power, or resources of any kind, that immigrants are not the reason you don't have those things. I am tired of trying to explain to leftist accelerationists that you are not going to convince the Democrats to be more left-wing by putting the far-right nutjobs in office, that you are not going to spite the Democratic Party or the powers that be by not electing them, that you are not going to show them shit, you're not holding them accountable, you are strapping the country and the most marginalized people in it to the fucking rails. I am tired trying to explain to people that the world they dream of cannot be accomplished with a single phone call, no matter what people who do nothing but run for president every 4 years tells you. I am tired of trying to explain anything to Americans who so desperately wanted to be able to critique Kamala Harris in a vacuum that an election is about choice. It is about choosing someone in relation to the other candidates. Couldn't possibly make sense to make these indictments of Kamala Harris in a vacuum. Meanwhile, Trump is the alternative. You know what's been on my mind all election season? Repeatedly, I hear Americans complain that every election they say this is the most important election, that democracy is in danger. Every time I hear this complaint, it leaves me at a loss as I just start firing questions at myself. Is something less true because you hear it often? What does it cost you to go vote? Why are people behaving as though by being asked to vote, the bare minimum, they are being asked to build the ark and load the animals by their lonesome by end of business day? Is it absurd that democracy and your personal freedoms would be under threat in a nation where white supremacists never wanted you to have those freedoms in the first place? Is it absurd that you would be told your vote is important and that it's necessary you exercise it in a nation where you had to fight for the right in the first place because the white supremacists in charge didn't want you to have it? I don't even understand the need for this exacerbation at the concept of being told at election time, the time where power is up for grabs, that it will yet again be important to prevent your enemies from gaining power. Someone promised that because it was important to vote in one election, that it could not or would not be important to vote in the next one? Yes, you keep being told that this is the most important election and that democracy is under threat, because it is. How many rights do we have to lose before we get it through our thick skulls that our rights are always in danger? That we will have to keep showing up and fighting for our rights. And not just by voting. That's the least of it if you can vote. Republicans spend 50 years actively working to overturn Roe, and they always show up to vote because they get that it's never just a one and done. You have to fight to get rights, and you have to fight to maintain them. Your ancestors did not fight for your right to vote in one election. No one told you only one election mattered. It's a right you keep exercising, and honestly, you should want to. No one should have to fight you to use what power you do have. I do not know why people keep acting like because the last election they were told was the most important, that the next one can't be. Have you ever had problems? And have those problems ever gotten worse over time? Exactly. Have you ever worked out and dieted so that you could lose weight? And when you lost that weight, how did you maintain it? By continuing to work out and eat right. But like I said, I have gone through all the emotions: disbelief, rage, and finally apathy. Or at least I am trying to feel apathetic because the pain is overwhelming. I've been in America since I was 14 years old and I am now 31 years old. That is 16 years and 5 elections that I've had no say in. All have impacted me greatly. But 2016 upended my life. 2016 brought forth one of the worst times in my life as an immigrant in this country. But as I sit here in 2024, coming to terms with what's in store for me again and how I avoid it, I know that America not only does not give a fuck, but it's the outcome they wanted. So there's no need for me to keep bearing my soul or trying to plead with this nation. I am going to save my breath, as I should have all election season. And as I will when Donald Trump takes hold of this country and people start to experience the fascism they insisted was already here. I am no longer in a position to advocate for Americans who advocate against immigrants like me. This is what the majority of Americans wanted, and my heart is with those of us who will not survive it.